I've been asked to do a video like this. It's Black History Month. I actually was going to do this either on Twitter or Instagram, but Elon Musk has completely destroyed Twitter and Facebook has completely destroyed Instagram. So I'm left with YouTube. So I get asked all the time, how do I write so much about Black Boston and where am I getting the information from? Because people are telling me that they can't find this stuff readily if they Google. Of course you can. Everything is not able to be found strictly by Googling. There's actually a lot of information you can't just Google. You have to have actual physical media to get information from, especially specific information. Anyways, since I write so much about Black Boston, I need these types of resources. So I have a list of places I go to, physical books. One, African Americans in Boston More Than 350 Years. This book is by Robert C. Hayden, forward by Joyce Faribault. This book has been around for a while. I use it often. Black Boston by George A. Levesque. Look at this. African American Life and Culture in Urban America, 1750 through 1860. If you're going to write about Black Boston and the history of it, you need this book. Another book that's absolutely necessary is Black Bostonians, Family Life and Community Struggle in the Antebellum North by James Oliver Horton and Lois E. Horton. Need this. I've written so much, I needed this book. A book that people say is the Bible, but I don't agree. Common Ground, The Turbulent Decade in the Lives of Three American Families. I think too many people place too much importance on this book. It's not the end-all be-all. I think that there are much better resources available. I think people get stuck in this book and think that this is how Boston is. You know what years this book comprised of? Boston in 2023 and Boston in this book are not the same animal. Anyways, that being said, more books about Boston and busing that are more impactful, in my opinion. Ronald P. Ford Masamo, Boston Against Busing, Race, Class, and Ethnicity in the 60s and 70s, with a new epilogue by the author. Why? Because you have to update information, because shit changes, things change, and you need more context for people to better understand the situation in Boston. Because people are running off of old B-roll footage from the 70s and black and white pictures, and it's 2023. Another book recently released by Zebulon Miletsky, Before Busing, A History of Boston's Long Black Freedom Struggle. I think everybody needs to read this book to understand that Black Boston has existed, will exist, and God damn it, our stories need to be told. This is the book on Black Boston. Chain of Change, Struggles for Black Community Development by my neighbor Mel King. Lives around the corner. He's still with us. Thank God. This is a crucial book. Find it, read it. This is a famous book about Black Boston too, even though it's not directly about Black Boston. Death at an Early Age, The Destruction of the Hearts and Minds of Negro Children in the Boston Public Schools by Jonathan Kazol. If you want to understand the context in which a world where Boston was not overwhelmingly non-white in the Boston public school system and how they failed the black students at every turn, this book is a must-own, it's a must-read. This is a book that I had to have. It was recommended to me. I did a documentary about Fenway Park, and one of the guys there told me that I need to read this book. So they're talking about running into issues of research about my neighborhood. And he says, you need to get this book, Good Neighbors, Gentrifying Diversity in Boston South End by Sylvie Tissot. I just got this recently, and I've read it. My mind has been open to so many things. She did a lot of research. She was told a lot of things when she was here in Boston, especially in this neighborhood. Moreover, since I like to write about music, and I always talk about Boston's musical history, the first few chapters of this book, Soundtrack to a Movement, African American Islam, Jazz, and Black Internationalism, talks about the black jazz movement when Boston was a jazz mecca, and how a lot of the early jazz musicians were either members of the Islamic faith or they were recruited by Malcolm X or Louis X and how they were so instrumental in, the jazz movement in Boston, and how they actually influenced the movement in, New York, Harlem, what have you. It says it right here in black and white. The first maybe 3 chapters of this book talk about it. There's this book, which I believe is a must own. Boston Boy. Growing Up with Jazz and Other Rebellious Passions by the late great Nat Hentoff, who was a Jewish guy who grew up in Roxbury. Before Roxbury completely switched over, there was white flight, and Roxbury became overwhelmingly black and Latino like we know it today. He actually lived there when it was a good mix of people, and there was a sizable Jewish population. But the things he recounts in his book are amazing, and also he's one of the all-time great music writers, and he's come to my neighborhood. Also, this book is a must-own, especially if you're from South End, Lower Roxbury like I am, or you love jazz. The Boston Jazz Chronicles, Faces, Places, and Nightlife, 1937 to 1962. I walk up and down these streets, and this book just tells me everything that I needed to know, almost everything that I needed to know about my neighborhood and what was there, what wasn't there, all the jazz clubs, the venues, the people that played there, and how much signage we don't have telling people the history of this neighborhood. And last but not least, there's this book, The Boston Creative Jazz Scene, 1970 to 1983. This book highlights a whole bunch of spots. The buildings are actually still around. Well, most of them are. And talks about Boston's creative jazz scene following after pretty much all but one of the major jazz venues between 1959 and 1970 burned down. The one that remained was Wally's Paradise, which was across the street and then moved to his current location on Mass Ave. And this highlights all of the other places and all the people who are, performing and everything else, and their contributions to the Boston jazz scene after Boston stopped being a so-called jazz mecca. So those are the places I go for research. I'm going to do another one about hip hop. 1.